They had a dispute where the builder, he finished doing all the framing. It was up, I think it was lock-up stage. It was for a 6-unit townhouse and one of the doors wasn't installed in. And the client thought, you haven't installed this one door, so I'm not going to pay you $300,000 for this whole claim because you've left out one door.
All right, so I know I'm very excited about today's episode, but Tuan, we have your little brother coming to join us on today's episode.
Or not so little brother. But no, thank you. Definitely great to see everyone again on today's, and thank you for joining us. Guys, we've got a great guest, Quoc Duong, who's my brother and also runs a partner company to ours, essentially Duo Tax Consultants. They're also quantity surveyors, but specialize in the field of all things quantity surveying, traditional work. And I think a lot of people out there who are building or thinking about building, renovating even, and thinking about getting a loan for that construction, well, look no further because we've got some great insights today from Quoc. So please welcome Quoc.
And we also hear some brotherly love stories, so stay tuned for that. All right, let's hear the story, guys. I want to hear who's got the funny brother story to kick us off for today's episode.
What's the best story, Quoc?
I think the slipper down the stairs is the classic
one.
I
like the slipper?
Yeah.
Or the slip?
The slipper.
All right.
I can't remember what I did to him, but I was running upstairs and he was chasing me, and I threw the slipper down the stairs like this, and it hit him in the head.
Right on the nose.
Right on the nose.
I was gushing out blood.
Oh, really? You was like bleeding?
Like just cleaned up.
Wow.
Cleaned up, going up the stairs and just on my back, nose bleeding. Just chasing this guy.
Did you get in trouble for it?
No, mum and dad wasn't him.
So you didn't tell. That's good.
We got some pearlers of stories for siblings. My sister. My mum had bought me a car when I finished high school.
Yeah.
And it was not a cheap car. It was a brand new car. It was a sports car. I love my cars.
Yeah,
as you know.
we know.
And my sister had got into a big fight with me. So she left the house. She took my bag, threw it out of mum and dad's place, from the front door. And as she threw it out, I shut the door behind her. I shut the door behind her. I locked it.
Yep.
And she was screaming.
Yeah.
And I think you were.
I was pretty young at the time, and she was screaming into the door, "Quoc, open the door, open the door." So I ran to the door, and I'm like this and looking at Tuan. Tuan's like, "You better not open the door." And I'm standing there crying.
He would have been probably about 4 or 5, and we'd probably be the end of high school. And then she got so upset when I let her back in.
Yeah.
She proceeded to leave the house to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And I went to my car the next day. There was a scratch about 4 inches long on my car.
Wow.
A key mark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was fuming.
Was it confirmed that she did it, or it wasn't? Is she still denying it today? Is she still denying it today?
There was no denying.
Okay, no denying.
No, but she thought that's even Steve. She thought we were square now.
Okay. So there's payback happened.
Yeah, exactly. A bit of payback. And man, was I distraught. It was my pride and joy that thing. Yeah. So, but the best story I got for you between the Duo brothers is one that stemmed from our Canley Heights office back in 2015.
Oh, yeah.
It's our first year of operation. We had an cockroach infested office. Right. We were renting that office for $75 a week.
$75 a week.
A week. Off our accountant, my accountant at the time.
Yep.
He's the one that told me about depreciation, and he, was a one-man band upstairs in Canley Heights. And I said, "Oh, look, I'm starting a quantity surveying business. Can I rent an office?" He goes, "Yeah, you can have next door." And so we did, and the day started, and I had Quoc and Andy working with me at that time, and we hit some milestones. Probably, maybe turned over a couple of $1,000 a week. So we decided to, go out for lunch on a Friday, as you do. So we had some pizzas, come back to the office. And what happened was I had an office, and just next door, Andy and Quoc would share a little office. We walked in there, and after lunch, and I said to Andy, I'd see them side on as I walk in through, past the office because it's all glazed.
Yep.
So I see Andy there working away, and there Quoc was. Head over backwards, falling asleep.
Must have been a good lunch.
It was a great lunch.
It was a very big lunch.
All right.
Yeah, so
there you go.
Did
you wake him up, or you let him have a sleep because he was a bit tired?
Yeah, I let him know. That was probably one of the. That's the story of Duo Tax, and productivity has improved since then.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear. The productivity only. You need to have your eyes open, and we're good to go.
That's it.
Good.
That's it. Sometimes I mean, I'm going to be the one to tell the truth here, but I would always, time to time nod off. Dan, I caught you once too, nodding off in the Duo Tax meeting.
Like, whoa.
But the sun was in your eyes. It was warm.
It's warm.
Middle of May.
Yeah, definitely.
And I fell asleep a few times, but it was always in front of my desk, not in the middle of the meeting or not side on through a glazed door.
I was always by myself. What you're trying to say,
And you're trying to keep your eyes open there. And I get it. But classic stories.
So Quoc's answer to that is he was worked too hard. Essentially, that's what it was saying. It's your fault because you worked too hard.
We were celebrating our biggest week.
Yeah, we were. That's
Good stuff. So Quoc, you actually
3 reports.
3 reports. I love it. That's good. So Quoc, so you started, with Tuan in the office before you moved over, to what you're doing. So tell us that story of how you sort of started working with your brother after throwing. Lucky actually gave you a job after almost breaking his nose.
So Tuan started off doing tax depreciation, and I was just helping him write some reports. And we had a few clients that needed council cost reports and bank reports.
Okay.
And it started from there, just preparing Section 94 reports and bank pre-funding reports, few progress claims, and it really just stemmed from there. And we just continued growing the business, and now we have 5-6 guys in that department working full time, and we're still growing it now.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So it sounded like that you found that there was a need for this sort of service to a lot of the clients that were already coming to get their depreciation schedules. There was additional needs and services that you felt like you could provide some value to the clients.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Right.
And essentially, with when we're dealing with depreciation, is what I've experienced is because I've worked in the quantity surveyor's office and working depreciation. It's never ever something that a company does both of. It's either depreciation as a quantity surveyor, or you do traditional quantity surveying. Yes, there's lots of facets in it, like a lot of sub type of quantity surveying, specialties or specializations. But really, you never find an office that does both. And I was always curious why. But now they're doing the work. I think you can sort of agree with this.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, Quoc, but you feel that the work is very distant from each other, and that's why.
That's right. Yeah, I used to work at a few different other firms, and their tax depreciation department was very small. I was probably the only guy in that whole department with a senior or a manager that sort of delegated some of the reports to me, but
it was never their core business.
Yeah, it wasn't their core business. That's right.
Yeah, nice. Actually, so guys, before we actually go any further, I actually forgot to mention, but we have a very special new segment. Now, it is called the Property Blueprint Brain Buster. So guys, stay tuned till the end of the episode. At the end of the episode, our special guest today, Quoc, is going to talk about something that you may hear a lot of in the news these days. Now, we hear a lot about builders going bankrupt, and we hear a lot about builders front-loading their contracts during the progress claims of a build. So we're going to handle that particular topic today at the end. So don't go anywhere, because we will cover that today at the end of today's episode. So Quoc, I think a place to sort of go to next is, can you explain a little bit of the difference between a quantity surveyor and an estimator? What is the main difference between the two, and how do they differentiate?
Yeah, so an estimator, they basically specialize in preparing, estimates for builders. So, pre-tender estimates, they just calculate the cost of works, whereas a quantity surveyor is engaged as an independent estimator by either the ATO, the bank, the insurance companies to work out the cost of work for council, to work out the cost of works.
So essentially, the word independent is what really sets apart a quantity surveyor from an estimator, right?
Yep.
From my understanding, because I was an estimator for a civil construction company for many years before going to quantity surveying, is that the estimator, I would estimate projects or tenders for the purpose of winning construction projects.
That's right.
Meaning that you've got to be competitive, you've got to work out the best rate, what the current rates are for, concrete or delivery of cement. That period of time, steel,
That's
And so that's where I find that estimators are vastly different to quantity surveyors, because now on the other side, we have to appease now the, independent bodies and things like, places, government bodies,
Yep.
banks,
That's right.
authorized parties such as, insurance companies. And so that's when a quantity survey comes in, because we're never trying to win projects. Is that correct?
That's right, exactly. Yeah. So the interest of the quantity surveyor is to protect all parties. So for example, if a bank is lending, $1 million to a client, if a project's $1 million and over, they classify that as high risk, and they want a quantity surveyor to basically verify and substantiate that the project will cost $1 million, because it's a lot of money there for a project, and they want to protect their investment.
Okay, so essentially, it sounds to me like the scenario would be that an owner has gone to a builder and acquired a price, and they've agreed upon some sort of price for a particular build or a project. Now this is being brought to the bank, and let's face it, the owner's not an expert in construction costs and individual items and how long things are going to take and how much stuff is going to go into it, and neither is the bank. They're not really an expert in that department. So essentially, you guys would come in and act as that independent expert to make sure both sides are happy with the scenario and verifying what the builder's actually put forward. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah, awesome. Yep. And you also mentioned something there before that, insurance companies is something that, that was something where they can help with your services. And I think of a story I heard a while ago where a house got burnt down and, it wasn't insured for the correct amount.
Is this the Westpac story?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly right. Yes. Yeah, so this is that story, and I believe that in these scenarios, can you just touch a little bit about how they could have come to you and got a particular report to help making sure they're insured?
Would have changed that scenario.
Would change the scenario, right? Because what happened, just for everybody watching, the house ended up burning down, and I believe the replacement value of the house was closer to say 900,000, and I think they were only insured for 500 or so. There's $300,000 or $400,000 shortfall that the owners were actually left with because the building was underinsured. So how could you help someone making sure they get insured for the right cost for their building?
Yeah. So what happened was they went through a Westpac for their insurance, and Westpac valued the house at about I think $400,000 or $500,000. Yeah. And the house actually burnt down, and it was a brand new house. What should have happened was they should have engaged a quantity surveyor to assess how much what the replacement value of their house is. And
just for replacement value, what does that include, Quoc?
Yeah, so it's not only the cost of
the
building, it's the cost of the demolition works. Submitting through DA, going through the tender again. The cost escalation as well. Okay. And that all accounts to the replacement value. So the cost of building works might be, $800,000, but the replacement value might be closer towards the $1.3-1.4 million.
And it's really important, the escalation for those the viewers out there. Escalation in costs relate to the cost of materials, of acquiring that material at that point in time. So if you go see go get an insurance policy for your building value or building insurance policy for that year, the quantity surveyor has to allow for escalation in materials, which is essentially, if you were to build a house 3 years ago, per ton, right, of concrete might have cost you $250 to supply cement, right, to your project. Now, 3 years on, because the cost of transport, materials to produce cement has increased by 30 to 40%. Now we're facing potentially $400 a ton. Now, that cost escalation is not allowed for with the insurance, not just with Westpac. This is only that example, but many examples out there. When we go and get a quote from our bank to get a policy instated, we actually they are assuming a lot of things that we can easily overlook. And in this case, quantity surveyors have been doing this for a long time, allowing for escalation in materials, cost of materials. But never has it really been a problem until now. And everyone knows the uplift in building costs and essentially housing prices is because of, sort of a double up on both the market as well as the cost of materials and construction. That now is actually something that people should be taking more seriously.
That's right.
I believe.
And we've seen that through COVID as well. Because of COVID, building prices have gone up by 30-40%.
So what would you suggest for a homeowner now after them hearing that story where they've got a policy and they're maybe a little bit worried that they could potentially be underinsured or they could leave themselves with a little bit of exposure? What would you suggest for say, a homeowner?
A few years back, there was actually a legislation that they got rid of where every 3 years you had to get your insurance replacement valuation report updated for any properties that were over $8 million though, which was
Over $8 million.
$8 million. But people are still doing that. They still get their reports updated every 3 to 5 years. So I would recommend every 3 to 5 years getting your
Replacement value.
Yeah, replacement value updated.
And the process for that is they would come to you.
Yeah.
What would be the process for someone to do that sort of thing?
So what happens is typically a quantity survey would charge, the first report would probably be the most expensive report. They go out to the property, they do an inspection. Every report after that, usually the quantity survey would ask, have you made any changes to the property? If not, we'll just update the report based on the building cost index and what the rate,
So you're essentially reviewing what you have taken at the initial inspection.
That's
right.
right.
You've already done a quantities or takeoff on exactly how many square meters of glazing and this and that, and then work out, okay, well, has the cost of glazing increased? Is that correct?
That's right.
In the current year, and then give them an updated value. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
It's a really good point to talk on because I think a lot of people, believe, their insurance is there to protect them, right? And then, but they don't realize that if they're not protected for the right thing or the right amount, when something goes wrong, it's almost sort of,
It is. It was, and that
essentially pointless, really, to have it not in place for the right thing.
Exactly, and how important it is to get details correct on an insurance policy.
Exactly right.
And we're seeing that firsthand with our clients that they're going through for building and landlord dual insurance.
100%.
But I think importantly is the devastation that we can see, the realization of these actual stories where people are uninsured for $300,000-$400,000, and was it from the news and went on to current affair. And it was, it is a bit of a nightmare. And I know that
heavily impacts families.
Such a rare occurrence, I'm sure. But when it does happen,
and I think that's the main thing. People think, it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to me, until it does. And for the cost of whatever the report costs, these guys could have been an extra $300,000 or $400,000, now out of pocket. And having the family and go through that scenario definitely makes a big change.
It's only $600 to $1,000 for a report for a residential house, typically.
And and on that scenario there, because it's a property in Gledswood Hills, it was part of a community title. So they couldn't just build any house they wanted. So they couldn't, even if, so for example, if you did, fair enough, you had a house and you'd be built for $1 million and it was underinsured and it was in a normal Torrance titled area. It wasn't strata, it wasn't community title, but this area had specific requirements for your house to look a certain way under a certain type of model from the developer. It would have to be replaced as that, and essentially they couldn't even skimp on the construction of that property there.
That's right.
Which was, from what I remember, I recall, it was a very good build. It was a decent 100%, area.
And their options are limited now.
So. Correct. Very reputable builder as well.
Sometimes you could skimp, right, and rebuild a house for $600,000. But in this case, they didn't have that choice, which is really the worst end of, sort of the worst scenario you could have possibly imagined. So
So Quoc, I know that I've heard a lot of banks talk about they're having to have particular quantity surveyors, on their panel of quantity surveyors. Is this something that you come into? Is this something that you offer as a service? And just touch a little bit about on how this process goes about on actually getting on a panel for a bank.
Why? And also a question is, so for the viewers out there, they would like to understand when they go to construction, the bank might tell me as the owner of the new construction or the new home that I need to appoint a quantity surveyor. Can you tell us why?
The reason why the bank engages a quantity surveyor is to protect their investment. So any projects that are over $1 million, the bank classifies that as high risk, and they want to make sure that they're not overfunding or there's a shortfall on the project.
Okay. Yeah, it's very important. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, as an owner, you want to make sure that your bank's not paying too much money to the builder, but at the same time too, you want to make sure you get to the end of the project and you haven't underfunded the build, because you don't want to sit there with a half completed home. And I think another good point to note is you mentioning that you guys were on the panel of builders. I imagine that these banks are not just allowing anyone on their panel.
That's
so
right.
Knowing that you guys are on the panel could definitely give some reassurance to the client. So how was that process of getting on there with the bank? And I'm sure you would have had to go through some hoops, but now you're there, it must be good.
So we're on the we're on the panel with some of the private lenders. We're getting onto the panel with CBA as well. We're in the process with ANZ and Westpac. It's really tricky to get onto the panel with the big four, because they only have about probably 10 to 15 quantity surveyors on their panel. And these quantity surveyors have been around for the last 40, 50 years. So it's been a really long process, and we're still working towards getting onto the panel with the.
But that's great to see that CBA is recognizing your organization as one of the preferred providers that they can go to when assessing for construction costs. And is there a limit to what they are allowing you to value construction projects up to?
So we specialize up to $8 million, and that's typically the luxury high-end home projects,
a lot of commercials
commercial projects, industrial, do a lot of townhouses and low-rise apartments, which is really popular in the property development space right now.
Yeah, so that's good. So if anyone out there that's watching and goes to the bank and gets a loan and is informed that, hey, you need to go appoint a quantity surveyor, they can approach you and look at and have you be the appointed quantity surveyor for projects up to 8 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Quoc, so in your organization, your team there, we prepare the construction cost estimates. Most of the time for these third parties, as you mentioned, the bank, the councils, whether you need an insurance policy taken out that's backed by a quantity surveyor's insurance replacement valuation, so they're not underinsured. Now, importantly, do you ever work for the other side? Do you ever engage? Does a builder or an owner ever engage your services to generally know what it costs to build or the feasibility of building?
Yeah, we do. We specialize in preparing tender estimates as well for builders. Obviously, there can't be a conflict of interest if a client has engaged us or a bank has engaged us to work on a project. We can't be preparing the tender for the builder as well.
It has to be arm's length, right? So you can only either do it for the bank side or the owner side.
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. And that's happened before, where the client has engaged us and the builder also engaged us for the same project. And
you've got to make a hard call.
Yeah, that's right.
To decide whether you're going to represent the bank or the owner on this occasion.
Yeah, that's right.
I actually hear a lot of stories that, you hear all these people designing their dream homes with architects and, they go through this design phase and add in all these amazing materials in there. Then they go to council, get all their plans approved, and then they come out and they go get quotes and they realize they're sort of way over budget. Could there be some sort of process in place where they potentially come to you during the design phase of their build to understand the cost of what their home's going to be?
That's right. Yeah, no, definitely. We call it a cost plan.
Okay.
So they'll engage us once the architect sort of drafts up a concept drawings. And we'll prepare a cost estimate based on what the client. So if they say it's going to be a high end finish, we'll allow for high end finishings.
So you generally increase your square meter rate so that
that's right.
There's a provision so that if we're going to finish it with high-end tiles or high-end marble, at least that's incorporated into the price.
That's right. And then as the drawings evolve and it gets more detailed, we'll then be able to apply those specs to our...
it's a lot more accurate by then.
Yeah, that's right, to our estimate. And we can, call those suppliers and get those exact rates, exact costings.
But that can't happen until you get a specification sheet.
That's right.
From the builder or the architect that scopes it up.
That's right, exactly.
Perfect. All right, so let's now circle back around to our property blueprint brain buster. You guys are hanging around that we did say that we're going to come back to this. And, what we were talking about were the builder's progress payments
Yeah.
And those being a lot heavily front loaded and the builder claiming a lot more for the project than actually what he's done, and also potentially minor disputes with actually the claim wording.
Yeah.
You know, for some of you who may or may not know, a builder will claim a progress claim. Say, for example, they may have a subject line as bricks, and then underneath that may be a few dot pointers into what's done. So tell me how these disputes can come about and potential solutions that can be put into place to help limit the risk on both parties.
Yeah, so with that there's I'll give you an example. I had a client and a builder. They had a dispute where the builder, he finished doing all the framing. It was up, I think it was lock-up stage. And one of the it was for a 6-unit townhouse, and one of the doors wasn't installed in. And the client thought, you haven't installed this one door, so I'm not going to pay you $300,000 for this whole claim because you've left out one door. And she decided to take him to NCAT, and it was just at every single stage there was
a tribunal to try to settle. Is that right?
Yeah, NCAT's the tribunal, and every claim there was some little small issue here and there about what's been done, what has been done. So I made a recommendation to do a monthly drawdown instead of a stage drawdown. The stage drawdowns are very common for residential projects that are very standard, whereas I always recommend a monthly drawdown for more complex projects. I would say anything that's 3 units or more, which is considered as commercial in the finance world, or high-end luxury homes when they do renovations, apartments. I always recommend monthly drawdowns, which is at the end of each month we'll come out to site as a quantity surveyor. We'll work out how much has been completed, and we'll pay the builder for whatever's been completed that month. And we'll come out probably maybe at the end of each month until the project's complete.
And it's important to do that, because that means that rather than having a vague stage drawdown, which means that for the viewers that don't know, drawdowns is essentially, instead of the bank paying the builder a lump sum at the beginning of the project, for example, $1 million, they will say $100,000 for 10 months.
That's right.
And that could be a monthly drawdown, depending on whether it's finished. But stage drawdowns can be very specific, isn't it? It can say doors, and then the owner or the bank would say, well, or the valuer even, right? When it's a low cost, you don't need a quantity surveyor. But when you need a quantity surveyor, you would want it to be specific as to, doors. Does it mean door jams? Or actually door fittings? You've got door knobs. And what is doors,
right?
right?
You may have things that you just can't, avoid on site, where, that door could have been a specific, very expensive door that they may have not decided not to put in at a particular time.
That's right.
So there may be these things that you may not know during the process of a build, where a scenario like that would keep the builder in place, would keep the owner happy. But I think most importantly, going back to what you said, NCAT, it stops the job. So I think if we can have processes and systems in place keep the job going, and you guys can assist with that, I think it's a win-win for everybody.
That's right. We'll come out to site. We can only claim for whatever's been installed on site. There can't be items sitting around, like for example, bricks, doors, or
if they're not installed, right? Just because they're delivered to site, is that right?
Doesn't mean, that's right. You can't claim those items. For example, even cooktops and ovens as well. A lot of builders will put that cooktop and oven on site, try to claim it, and then bring it and to put onto another site. So that's a really common issue as well.
And essentially, that's what the construction funding is all about. It's trying to alleviate builders from getting funding for a project and then taking that funding and then fund other projects, because as builders they have multiple projects going on at the same time. Right. Is that right, Dan? From your experience?
100%. That's right. So it's very important to make sure you had those protection things along the way, and we keep the job moving. So it's very important to do that as well too. So guys, I hope you enjoyed our property blueprint brain buster. And if you have any brain busters that you want us to bust on upcoming episodes, or something that's related to today's episode, leave a comment below or send a message to our Instagram or our Facebook page so we can get that addressed on next. So Quoc, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tuan. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please like and share. And if you found some value in today's episode, don't forget to pass it on to a friend of yours.
Okay, guys, that wraps it up. And if you want to get in touch with Quoc, who's the expert at all things quantity surveying, reach out to him at quoc@duotax.com.au.